Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. Indian police are investigating Monday's deadly explosion near the Red Fort under the country's main anti-terrorism statute. The blast killed at least 12 people, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi vows that all conspirators will not be spared. The US Senate passes a compromise bill to end the longest government shutdown in American history after weeks of political deadlock. The measure restores funding and delays President Trump's workforce cuts until January, now awaiting approval in the House. BBC director Tim Davie praises the network's journalists as he steps down amid accusations of bias and legal threats from Donald Trump. Davie says he is very proud of the BBC's reporting, despite the broadcaster's deepening leadership crisis. Turkey's defence ministry says 20 people were on board a military cargo plane that crashed in Georgia while returning from Azerbaijan. Search and rescue teams are at the site as officials work to determine the cause of the accident. UNICEF says Israel is denying entry of essential supplies like syringes and baby bottles into Gaza, hindering relief operations. The agency warns its mass children's vaccination drive is stalled as 1.6 million syringes and solar fridges remain stuck in customs. California Governor Gavin Newsom says any future Democratic president would rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement without hesitation. Speaking at COP30 in Brazil, he calls President Trump's withdrawals from the deal a moral and economic abomination. The Pakistani Taliban says it carried out the suicide attack that killed 12 people outside a court in Islamabad. The group claims it targeted judicial officials and warned of more strikes until Islamic Sharia law is fully implemented. Iraqis head to the polls to elect a new 329-member parliament, with Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani seeking a second term. Many voters remain sceptical of change, seeing the election as favouring established parties that control the country's oil wealth. Now we have some latest updates from the Delhi car blast. The Delhi government has announced compensation for victims of the recent Red Fort blast. Delhi's Chief Minister Rekha Gupta confirmed that $11,000 will be provided to the families of those who died, almost $6,000 for those permanently disabled and $2,000 for those seriously injured. Meanwhile, due to security concerns, the metro station where the blast took place will remain closed on November the 12th, although other stations will operate as usual. India's Home Minister Amit Shah has instructed the Forensic Science Laboratory to match samples from the blast site with those collected from the bodies in the car. Meanwhile, prominent Muslim bodies have raised concerns about security lapses and called for a transparent, unbiased investigation. The National Investigation Agency has officially taken over the investigation after it was handed over by the Ministry of Home Affairs. We have some breaking news coming in now. And the deadly car explosion near Delhi's Red Fort claimed 12 lives and left 20 others injured. Authorities have identified 6 victims so far. Lokesh Agrawal, a shop owner from Uttar Pradesh, was in Delhi visiting a relative at the hospital. Ashok Kumar, another victim, a bus conductor with the Delhi Transport Corporation, was returning home after his shift. Pankaj Sindhi, a 22-year-old taxi driver, died when his car was destroyed in the blast. Amar Kataria, a 34-year-old businessman who was on his way to the metro when the explosion occurred, and Mohsin, an e-rickshaw driver from Meerut, had come to Delhi looking for work. Numan, a 22-year-old cosmetics shop owner from Shamli, was in Delhi to buy supplies, and his cousin Arman was also injured in the attack. Several others are still waiting for news about their missing loved ones and family members. Authorities have promised an update later today as the investigation continues. Okay, we move on and stay in South Asia, and according to Pakistan's Interior Minister, 12 people were killed and 27 others injured in a suicide bombing that occurred outside a district court building in Islamabad. Moreover, the Pakistani Taliban terrorist group, otherwise known as the TTP, has recently claimed responsibility for the attack, and the group has stated that the bombing targeted judicial officials, including judges, lawyers and others who enforced laws which it deemed un-Islamic. The TTP has also threatened further attacks until Islamic Sharia law is implemented in Pakistan. Meanwhile, authorities are investigating the nature of the blast, and police are unsure whether it was a suicide attack or a car bomb. Cordons have been set up around the court building and ambulances have been deployed to the scene. Now we have managed to gather one more eyewitness who was there at the time of the blast. Let's listen in to them.
12:25 से 12:30 के दरमियान हुआ है। उस टाइम हम कैफेटेरिया में बैठे हुए थे और जब ये धमाका हुआ है तो जाहिर सी बात है बहुत खौफनाक और बहुत ज़ोरदार धमाका था और वहाँ पे एक हलचल सी मच गई। हम लोग सारे बाहर की तरफ आ गए। उस टाइम तो ये हालत था कि मतलब सारे लोग अक्सर लोग जो है ना वो मतलब मुंतशिर हो गए थे और अक्सर मतलब एक बगदम सी मच गई थी और वहाँ पे रश भी बहुत ज़्यादा था लोगों का और गाड़ियाँ भी थी, बाइक भी थे। इसमें मतलब अक्सर जो काफ़ी जो लोग थे ना मतलब इसमें मतलब आउटसाइडर इसमें ज़्यादा वो हुए हैं और ये धुआं भी था और बिल्कुल बहुत मतलब काफ़ी ज़्यादा इसमें होता और धमाका जो है ना वो मतलब काफ़ी खौफनाक और ज़ोरदार धमाका।
Now, at the COP30 Climate Summit in Belém, Brazil, California Governor Gavin Newsom stated that a future Democratic president would re-enter the Paris Climate Accord without hesitation. Newsom strongly criticised President Donald Trump for withdrawing the United States from the global agreement, calling it an abomination that Trump pulled out twice. In his remarks, Newsom emphasised the importance of the Paris Agreement, describing it as both a moral commitment and an economic necessity. Let's take a listen in to the California governor.
Unquestionable, without hesitation. It's a moral commitment. It's an economic imperative. It's both and. It's an abomination that he has twice, not once, pulled away from the accord. So I'm here doubling down on them as part of the work we're doing with subnationals. We are committing, and by the way, we're not only committed as a subnational, we're exceeding all of the goals, and we're proving it can be done.
We're now joined by Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator and he joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mark, for joining us on this discussion. Of course, Governor Newsom has said that the future Democratic president would re-enter the Paris Climate Agreement, much like Joe Biden did in 2021 after he took office. What does that mean politically and structurally if the US were to re-enter the Paris Climate Agreement?
Good to be with you, Thomas. Well, why are we surprised that this would come out of Gavin Newsom's mouth? I would have to say, a man that in many ways has failed various members of California in regard to fire control, in regard to allowing people to actually go and thin out forests where they need to make sure that there is an adequate water supply in the great state of California that would also could have its own seat in its own name at the G7. This is, in my humble opinion, political maneuvering, and Gavin Newsom is getting ready for his pitch to run for president at the end of the Trump tenure. And that's how I view it. You and I, we could have many conversations as we do, but we need a couple of hours to then go through the fact of the whole aspect of climate change, where that has come from, what this pushes in regard to control, and why everyone is so keen to have windmills and solar panels all over decent farmland. Within California, because of the sun, understandably, put some solar panels up on top of people's houses. But this is political maneuvering and tyranny as far as I am concerned, because that is the political ideology of Mr. Newsom. But just quickly, just to end this, in my humble opinion, is his bid straight away to then say, I wish to run for president at the end of Trump's tenure. Thomas.
Of course, what do you make of Donald Trump's view on climate change? And one could say possibly the whole Trumpism movement now. Of course, 97% of climate change scientists, according to NASA, they agree that humans are causing global warming and climate change. Donald Trump's contradictory statements there, and of course, using the US as taking the US as a whole and pulling it out of these net zero targets and all these green energy agreements. Do you think that if in 4 years a Democrat does get put in office, that they can claw that progress back?
According to them, that's what they would like to do. But the key issue is this: if you then turn to China, that's building a coal-fired power station at least once a month or once every three weeks, it's, you know, why are people not pulling them up in that regard? And also returning to basic science, what do trees do with CO2? They take in CO2 and they turn it into oxygen. And the last time I looked, that is what you and I, Thomas, need to breathe or even have a conversation. This is about the deindustrialization of the West. And in the sort of, if you believe in a global governance mindset and elite, the number one thing that they see in the way of that is the Constitution of the United States. So if we can deindustrialize America and what it stands for in regard to the American dream, and obviously Gavin Newsom, being I think the nephew of Nancy Pelosi, has then benefited by that, an extremely wealthy man, but doesn't want anyone else to then benefit within California or the rest of the world. The fact is that many scientists, Thomas, will sign up to that, but they also get grants to then carry on their particular studies or whatever they are writing to come up with various documents. The climate, as on the Trump administration say, the climate scam, there's a long investigation to then look into that and what this means. And fundamentally, it is the deindustrialization of the West, Thomas.
Yes, Mark, do stay with us as we have further stories coming our viewers' way. President Donald Trump has taken aim at France during an interview. When asked about Chinese students in American universities, Trump suddenly shifted focus, saying, quote, "We've had a lot of problems with the French." He accused France of unfairly taxing US technology companies and warned of possible tariffs in response. Trump's remarks come as Washington reconsiders visa rules for Chinese students, with the president now saying 600,000 will be allowed into the US. His relationship with French President Emmanuel Macron has long been uneasy, marked by disagreements over climate policy, France's recognition of Palestine, and NATO defense spending. Let's listen in to the statements.
Aren't you better?
Yeah.
Really? I don't know. I'm not so sure. We've had a lot of problems with the French, where we get taxed very unfairly on our technology, where, you know, they put 25% taxes on American products. Look, assuming everyone treats us badly, because that's the way I am, but we take in trillions of dollars from students. You know, the students pay more than double when they come in from most foreign countries. I want to see our school system thrive, but at the same time, I know you and I disagree.
Yeah.
We're never going to agree on
No.
it, but that's okay.
Russia is slamming Lithuania over its latest move on the Belarus border. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called Lithuania's actions antics, accusing Vilnius of closing the border and leaving hundreds of Lithuanian trucks stranded in Belarus. Lavrov also said that no one in the European Union has condemned Lithuania's actions, comparing the EU's attitude to Washington's support for dictators it favours. He claimed the Baltic states are being used to provoke Russia and create grounds for possible NATO military action under Article 5. Lavrov warned the EU bears responsibility for what he called the out-of-control behaviour of its Baltic members, recalling that Moscow had once warned the bloc that the Baltic nations were not ready for EU membership. He added that the Baltics have only become more aggressive since joining the EU and NATO. Mark joins us once again. Mark, Lavrov has called Lithuania's decision to close its Belarus border antics. What's the actual security or political reasoning behind Vilnius's move?
And the end of your little piece there, when you refer to Lavrov in regard to the Baltic states and then joining the EU, whether they were mature enough to do that, he's referring to comments that he made in 2004, and we are now, in 2025, and there have been many changes. We are looking at that Kaliningrad corridor because where Kaliningrad is, that was something that the country where the Russians annexed that just after the Second World War. They have a lot of investment in there militarily, and also they are constantly concerned about the fact that they are surrounded by other NATO countries. You quite rightly read out in regard to Article 5. The Russians are then concerned because Ukraine, after their invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, where they invaded a sovereign country, they are then also concerned, as Ukraine is pushed, to then be a fully paid up member of NATO, and what that immediately brings. If you look at the map, where Kaliningrad is, Lithuania is to the north, and Poland is to the south, and Belarus is then joining through that Kaliningrad corridor to Kaliningrad. It is a trade route, and as you just read out, with all the trucks then backed up. If we look things historically, people are always concerned about a flashpoint, and I would have thought historically, and it wouldn't surprise me if Lavrov then brings it up in regard to the First World War and then the killing of Archduke Ferdinand. There is a lot of history there again to unpack. But the concern of Lavrov is, are you pushing for a flashpoint and to literally expand this war? And also, again, as I reiterate, we have to remember they invaded a sovereign country in February 2022, and they then have to face the consequences of that. It's dangerous, to be honest, Thomas, but this is what happens politically.
Okay,
sorry.
It's all right. Lavrov's mention of creating grounds for Article 5 action, of course, is a serious charge. Is Russia genuinely worried about escalation along its western borders?
Again, you ask a very good question, because we see all the drones that they have then tested in regard to Poland and elsewhere. Plus, that also is a distraction, while people then are having to look at their own defenses, and then instead of looking at what's happening in Ukraine or passing munitions into that. What you ask is very, very important, because it is an interesting comment that Lavrov has actually said. At the end of the day, we've all thought that the Russian economy would come to a grounding halt by now, after all the sanctions and after their invasion in February 2022. It's still there. We could argue that is with huge support by people buying its energy, and also huge support from China. But maybe they are. They should be concerned, as we should be in any escalation. But it is something that President Zelensky has pushed, and would like Ukraine to then join NATO. And also, as you are fully aware, where President Trump has made comments about NATO actually stepping up and paying what it should do in regard to the defense of Europe. All of those comments are in the mix there, Thomas.
Yes, Mark Sutherland, thank you very much for joining us there for those stories. We now move on over, and we move to Africa. And in war-torn Sudan, women are facing unimaginable hardships, with rape being used as a weapon of war. The UN Women Agency reported that women in El Fasher in North Darfur have endured starvation, displacement, sexual violence, and the destruction of healthcare facilities. The conflict between Sudanese armed forces and the RSF militia has caused widespread suffering, with thousands of women and girls fleeing to unsafe areas. Rape is being used deliberately as a weapon with women at high risk during their journey to find water or food. Basic necessities like sanitary products are unaffordable and malnutrition is rampant, with infants suffering from severe hunger due to their mother's inability to breastfeed. The international community has been urged to act quickly to end the violence and provide humanitarian aid, especially to women-led relief efforts. Alison Mutler joins us here on the broadcast, and she is the former Associated Press Bureau Chief. She joins us live from Romania. Alison, thank you very much for joining us on this story. The United Nations says that rape is being used systemically as a weapon of war in Sudan. Of course, how widespread is this pattern, and what does it tell us about the brutal RSF's tactics in El Fasher?
Well, as you say, it is brutal and it targets women, and the idea is to harm them, to violate them, and to also to incapacitate them, because from some of those rapes you'll get pregnancies, and then you'll have women who have to look after themselves and an unborn child, and then childbirth, which will make it harder and harder. And you also have children and girls, and the women traditionally looking after the young children. So you're basically taking out half of the population by targeting women. Women are, we forget when we talk about rape, women are weaker physically in the first place than men, and also socially and economically, particularly in a country like Africa. But physically, women are weaker, and if they're raped, apart from being violated and all the trauma that causes, they can be pregnant, and pregnant during a war when there aren't any resources, when they're scrabbling to get food. I understand they're going into forests, they're getting berries, and they're making soups, and there isn't enough food. People are starving. And so basically you're decimating the population by attacking women and girls, which is half the population.
Yes, and Sudanese women's groups are demanding a seat in ceasefire negotiations, yet they do remain sidelined. Why is women's representation still treated as symbolic and rather than central to the peace-building process?
I think because, as I said, women are discriminated against, particularly in a society like Sudan. And I don't think there's been a realization, as your report says, that rape is a weapon of war. And therefore, it's just been treated as something horrible that happens during war. Men shoot each other and fight each other, and they use knives. And women, they get raped. Well, that just happens. So I think there hasn't been enough awareness at a high enough level that it is actually a weapon of war. It is designed to destroy women and to destroy children, which means destroying the future of a country. So once I think this awareness reaches a high level, which it seems to be now with the UN making these statements, then perhaps it will become easier for women to get a seat, because they do need to get a seat, because for a man, I think probably rape is more of an abstract concept, an abstract crime, but a woman can understand what it would mean to her, her future, whether she becomes pregnant and then she has to give birth. It is a weapon of war, but I don't think there's been enough public awareness about it, particularly not at a high level. But the UN is definitely pressing for this to raise awareness, and so that it is treated very seriously at the highest level.
Indeed, and Alison, starvation and of course lack of sanitary products are being reported as a part of a structural assault on women's bodies in Sudan. What do you think of the denial of food, healthcare and hygiene be recognised as a form of gendered violence?
Well, it is. It's women need sanitary products, men don't. And it is a dehumanizing aspect of this war. I read that sanitary products there can cost like $27. That's a huge amount. Even in Western countries, they don't cost that amount. But this starvation, women are the ones who are looking after their family. They're the ones feeding the children. If you go to a family in Sudan, you will find that the woman is the last one to be fed. She will make sure the men are fed. She'll make sure the children will be fed. And then only she'll be the last person to be fed. And if the woman isn't fed, she is weak and she can't look after her family and she can't look after her children and she can't look after herself. So it is a deliberate targeting of women as a gender as a form of war violence. I think it's becoming more and more obvious.
Yes, Alison Butler, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to have you on the programme. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour.